Hey everyone, welcome to the studio. It is time to kick off our focus on adding people to our paintings. And when I say adding people, we're not going to be painting the figure from life in the traditional sense, but rather we're going to find some ways that we can add a little bit of life to our paintings. Whether they're just small suggestion of figures in the distance, or maybe the people are the subject of your painting. But we are not going to focus on making those people photorealistic. They're not going to be portraits. They're going to be a way that we can suggest a little bit of life. So that means we have permission to make them a little bit less than perfect, which is great, because I know I've heard from some of you who are like, I don't paint people. But what I want to share with you are ways that we can express the figure in the landscape or in our paintings by just simple ways where we do have to get the proportions correct. They have to be in proportion to their environment, but other than that, we can be more expressive with our marks and our colors and the way that we paint them. So just take a deep breath and say, you know what, they don't have to be perfect to tell a story. For those of you who are saying to yourself, well, I don't know about this month, I really don't want to paint people, I want you to bear with me, because anything that I share always is grounded in the basics of color and value, drawing, composition, and all the things we need to know in order to make a good painting. We can take what I'm going to share with you this month in our figure or people focus and apply it to anything else that we choose to paint. So just because you think, oh, I don't want to paint people, there's a lot to be learned from painting people. Just like when I did the marsh focus and people were like, I don't want to paint a marsh. But there's a lot to be learned in each subject that we do paint. So stick with me on this. So I'm going to start simple. We're going to start our focus on painting the figure by painting the back side of the figure. This way, we don't have to get involved with painting their face. We don't have to get involved with the details of their hands, all these things that are trickier to paint. By approaching them from the back side, we can keep things simple, and that's the whole idea. So I want to share with you 3 words that I want you to keep in mind the entire time that we focus on painting figures or people. And I'm going to just call them people paintings. One thing that I like to do when I'm traveling out and about is take pictures, candid shots of people. People just doing things. And it may be that I like what they're doing, or it may be that I like the feeling of light, but I'm interested in their story. I'm a very nosy person, so I want to know what's going on. So I have gathered quite a few photos of people just doing stuff, okay? But I've been hesitant to paint them because I think that it's going to be complicated. So what I have to remind myself, and I'm going to remind you, is that they are only shapes. So what we're going to do is suggest simple shapes. And here's what I'm going to be painting today for our demo. The back side of 3 figures at a cafe getting ice cream. And this was in France. I loved the story. Are these I think they're the grandparents. You see, I got to tell the story. I like their hats. They each have a hat on. It was a hot summer day. Getting ice cream. I think I was eating my ice cream at the time I saw them. There's some issues with the photo because it was just a very quick, candid capture. It's kind of dark. Things are kind of wonky as far as, because of the way I had my camera, I'm trying to be incognito. So there's some things that I'll have to fix. But it's an interesting story, and I look at them and I say, you know what? They're people, but they're really shapes. Let's look at the shapes. For example, each of their shirts is basically a rectangle, right? Look at the rectangle. This little girl, her whole body and skirt and shirt, that's a rectangle. Their hats are basically squares, on top of their heads, little squares. Excuse me. All of the things in the distance, in the surroundings, look like they're complicated if we can see up close, but it's just a collection of shapes. And the writing, that's another thing, and I'll get to that in the demo. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to, when I painting these little guys, I'm going to paint them small. So what I want to suggest to you is work a little bit smaller, no smaller than 5 by 7. But don't try to do a 16 by 20 because then your people are going to have to be much larger and that's going to be harder to be suggestive. But if we're painting small, and I think this is like an 8 by 8 square, then our shapes are going to be smaller and it's easier to be a little bit more suggestive with our marks, more expressive with our marks than if we're trying to paint them large. So I'm going to suggest you work on the smaller side. This is 8 by 8, it's a good size. And then the next thing that I'm going to do, and by the way, this is just a piece of dark gray sanded paper. It's, excuse me, Ming Art sanded paper from China, and I have a few scraps left over. Let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. Here's a little scrap piece. It's like a really nice sanded surface. And a nice sturdy piece of paper. Now, I got it at the IAPS convention last year, and I'm just using up my scraps. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our drawing. Now, this is the only time that I will use a pastel pencil. This happens to be a Derwent pastel pencil, and I selected a color that was light enough to show up, but dark enough that I can cover up with my pastel mark. So if I make it too dark or too light, then it's harder to cover up the marks. Because as you can see, I have already done the drawing, and I'll talk about that, but I'm not very precise, so like I've gone over areas a few times in my drawing. So you want to choose a color that's not going to show up once you start painting. And I'm going to do a video review of this, but you might be interested in finding a sharpener for your pastel pencils. This is Faber-Castell, and it has 2 different sides. I'll do a review of this another time, but I just want to show you that it does sharpen your pastel pencils, usually without breaking them, so it does a good job.
Open that up.
What? I'm going to do a review of this. I think it deserves a review of its own. Alright, so let's talk about the drawing, the initial drawing. Remember, suggest simple shapes. The first thing that I did before I drew in the figures was I drew in the background stuff. So I know that I want the wall here and the sign to be here. Then what I did was I made little marks, tick marks, where I want my figures to end up. Because I don't want things to be cut off unnaturally. Like I don't want to cut them off at their knees. I don't want them to be too close to the edge because then it could be covered up by a frame or a mat. So if I can mark the outside spots where I don't want her to go over any further. I want him to end here. I want the head to end here. And I have those tick marks. Then I can make my drawing fit within, basically, and not have them run off the page where I don't want them to go. So I did that. The next thing I did is I took the biggest shape that I saw, and I started with the woman, and I did a drawing of the large shirt shape, and then her little arms sticking out on either side. And then from there I did the square for the hat. And then I wanted to make sure that I made the man in the correct proportion to the woman. So I think actually his hat goes up a little bit higher. One thing that I do is I first draw it freehand. This is how I work. I draw it freehand based upon what I see. Then I go back and measure to make sure that the drawing is correct. And I use a bamboo skewer to measure. Now, if you want more information on this, I did a whole lesson on this back in November of 2019 on how to use the stick to measure. But basically, what you do, I have a dry throat today. Hold on a sec. So I measure her shirt in the photograph. So I put my thumb here, and it's this long. Then I go over to the guy, and I say, oh gosh, from his collar to the bottom of his shirt, it's the same. They're the same. So then I drew in the guy already, and then I check here. So it should be the same. It's a little bit short. So I could actually move this down a little bit, but I'm going to leave it. It's not that's not a critical measurement. Let's try something else. Let's see about the size of their heads from the top of her hat to her top of her shirt. Let's try him. It's the same, so it should be the same. And it is. And you can do the same thing. How about the width of, you know, from her shoulder to her shoulder, and then find something else to match. They're the same. These two guys are the same size. So then you do the same in your drawing. They should be the same, and they are. So I did it freehand, and then I used this to check the measurements. And then you can also look at your photo at the negative spaces. Like, look what's around them. So you see that her shoulder in the photo actually touches the wall. I could move the wall over if I wanted to, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect, so you know that's something that I can alter. How about the spacing where the little girl's head is in the photo? Look at how it lines up with their elbows right here. The bottom of her head lines up with their elbows, and it does in the drawing. So what I do is I just use this bamboo skewer, measure in the photograph, and find things that are similar, and then I make corrections to the drawing. I find it easier to do the freehand drawing first and then make corrections rather than measure and then write and put down all the proportions. One other thing you can measure is how about the space in between them. All right, so it's from the edge of her head to the edge of his face is this big. All right, we got to find a measurement that we know we got already. How about the width of his body, his shirt? So in the drawing, it's this. If I take this and move it to the shirt, I see that it's bigger, which means that basically his head could come over more. Is it totally critical? No, because the proportions of him are correct. That'll just give me more space to work with in the negative space, which is fine. Some measurements are critical and some are not as critical. You almost knocked over the camera. He's sneezing. Alright, so after we have the drawing in place, the next thing we do is we start with the pastel. I am not going to do an underpainting for this particular painting. Sometimes I'll do an underpainting when I'm doing figures. I'm going to be showing an upcoming demo with a watercolor underpainting. This time I'm just going to go right in with the pastels because I basically want to show you how I just suggest simple shapes with just the side of the pastel making kind of bold marks. So yes, I could do an underpainting. It doesn't hurt to do an underpainting, but I basically want to show you how I use the side of the pastel to make those suggestive marks. The pastels that I'm using today, I've not used before in any demo because I pulled them off my shelf today and thought, you know what, these pastels will work great for the small figures, these small people. These are Girault pastels. We spell it Girault. They're from France. They're wonderful pastels. They look like they'd be hard, but they go on soft. They deserve a review, and we will get to a review at some point. But they work really great for doing these small figures because of the size, but yet they're still soft. So the first thing that I'm going to do is block in all of the dark shapes, okay? So I'm working this the same way I work a landscape, block in the dark shapes. If I squint down at my photo, I see that it's dark all around the figures. I'm going to take a dark blue and basically go around my figures. I'm not really worried if I get some pastel within the figure. I can go over that. And just what about all the stuff that I need to straighten this out a little bit. It's on an angle in the photo, but again, that was wonky because I was trying to be discreet, go incognito. I'm going to be very suggestive of the stuff that is behind the people, like the ice cream counter. I'm going to be very suggestive of that kind of stuff back there. Because what is it? It's the story about the people. All right, so there's the background. dark. What about within the figures? Where is it dark? Well, her pants are dark, so I'll put those in. When I squint at him, he has blue pants and there's some kind of dark at the belt line there in the middle. But maybe a shadow on the side under his sleeve. And maybe there's a shadow under her arm. But that's about it. Alright, so there's my darks. The next thing that I'm going to do is, let's add another layer of color to the dark. Sometimes when I'm doing this, I want to just go ahead and block in the whole background just to give a sense of place. So I think I'm going to actually do that. So basically, to do the to the background, I just have to remind myself it's suggesting simple shapes. Suggesting simple shapes. So I'm not worried about all the minute details of this background. I'm basically using colors to suggest the shapes that I see. I'm going to paint the words and the sign, but I'll do that last because that's kind of a fun trick that I think you're going to enjoy. There's a menu on the side there that we can suggest. There's a lot more color going on besides the dark. All right, now let's get to the figures. So we blocked in the dark part of the figures. Now when I squint at it, I want to see where the light is. So we have, and I'm going to use a light value to paint the lights. So we have the light on the edge of his hat. So I'm going to just make a light shape to suggest the light on his hat. Her hat has light on it. Now her hat is not yellow, but I'll add another layer to get the right color. The back side of her shirt is getting light. The side of his shirt is getting light. I'm not going to paint the crazy pattern on her shirt. I'm going to just simplify that. I don't think that's all that important for the story. The little girl's shirt has light on it. Oh, she's got hair. So those are the light shapes. So we've got the dark shapes, the light shapes, and then we're going to do what's in between, and then we're going to pull it all together. So we'll do some middle value. So I got to decide what color her her shirt is going to be. Let's make his shirt blue. So we'll take a middle value blue and just paint. I'm suggesting simple shapes. Suggesting simple shapes. And it's okay that if you just keep repeating it to yourself, just to remind yourself of that's what you're trying to do. He has some light on his pants. The little girl has, I'm going to darken her skirt first and then add some of the lighter bits. Okay. Let's see. Let's give her a pinkish color shirt rather than that crazy plaid. So I'm just suggesting where it's more of a middle value. Her pants are blue. Let's leave them blue. The little girl has a pink shirt, so let's incorporate a little bit of darker or middle value pink. And let's give her a pink bow on her hat. Let's see. Middle values. Where else? They don't have heads, so we've got to do their heads. Let's go ahead and finish their clothes. So basically, see how I'm just using the side of my pastel to make wide marks? He needs a little more, I'm just adding a little more dark. Now she has a pink shirt now, but I have a pale yellow feeling of light, so I'm going to pick up a pale pink and add another layer to the light on her shirt. She's got some on her sleeve. And then she's going to have her elbow sticking off here. And let's make her hat pale pink. And she's got a floppy brim. So we want to suggest the floppy brim. The little girl has a green hat. Let's go ahead and put that in now. So we'll put a little square of green. And let's give it a little bit of a brighter green so you can see it. Suggest simple shapes. He's got a straw hat that has some darker area on the right hand side and a darker hat band. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And now we need to do their skin tones. So I have a selection of skin color, flesh color. I'm going to start with a darker. We're going to talk more about how to paint the suggestion of facial features in an upcoming lesson. So that's not the focus of today. Today is the focus of today is how can we suggest simple shapes. And I'm doing their elbow. So I start off with the darkest. She's a little bit funky with her shirt. We're going to have to fix that up a little bit. But one thing that I'll do is I'll go through one pass, right? And then I will come back and do some housekeeping. So we'll add a little bit of light to their skin. And how can we do that housekeeping? So now we have their figures basically in place. So now what I'm going to have to do is come back and paint kind of what's around them, refine that a little bit more, so then I can carve in and refine the shape, their shapes a little bit more. We have the ice cream counter that we can put in. Something's happened with her. This is too light, so I'm going to just use my finger, darken that a little bit. I think what I did was I made her hat up too high. So I'm going to just brush it out a little bit. And this is one thing that you can't be afraid of doing when you're doing these kind of people pictures, is that all important brushing it out till you get it right. Oops. I'm going to lower her hat just a little bit and give it a little bit of a better flop. And then it's a little bit darker underneath her head. So I can come back and fix that a little bit better. A little bit brighter, lighter right in there. So that's a little bit better. What else is there? We have to start suggesting the stuff behind the ice cream counter. So there's the little bit of counter space. There's like ice cream cones over here. So let's just put in some of the ice cream cones. Oh, I didn't do the little girl's hair. So let's give her some hair going down the back of her neck. We don't really see her skin. And then let's brighten up her little pink shirt a little bit. So really it's a matter of putting it in and then going through and adjusting it. But I'm always mindful of the fact that I'm only trying to tell a story. I'm not really worried about doing portraits. I want to tell the story. So we can definitely refine some of these areas, and it's just a matter of looking. She has a darker headband too. It's a matter of paying attention to what's there, looking at it, and then duplicating it. And I will tell you right now, it's very hard to do that and talk at the same time. So forgive me on that. I think it takes more concentration to get a figure or people right in a painting than a bush or a tree. You know what I'm saying about that? So I'm doing my best to narrate as well as pay attention to what I'm doing. So I'm just hinting at some of the stuff behind the counter. I'm going to pull, oh, he had actually, you can see his legs. Let's just put a little bit of that, a little bit of skin. And I really need to, I might change the color of her pants because it blends in. Could she not have purple pants? Why not? And then that way it will stand out from the background a little bit better. All right, now I want to show you a really quick trick, because if we're going to be putting people, and you might have some signage going on. Oh, I do have to fix her collar. That doesn't look good. All right. How can we paint the words and keep it painterly? And I could write the words cafe, but then it wouldn't be in line with the painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the color that the letters are supposed to be, and I'm going to paint that mark in where I want them. I'm going to add that color down in here just to move it around a little bit. All right, now I'm going to take the color that's behind it, which is kind of a gray yellow. Watch this. And I'm going to paint that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some negative painting and paint the word cafe. So here is C. So I need to carve into the background color to make a C. And the next letter is A. So I'm going to carve in to make an A. And then we got an F. And then we have an E. Let's see. All right, so now we have the word cafe, but it is in a painterly kind of expressive way. Rather than if I just wrote cafe, it would look like I wrote on top of a painting. And I don't want that. I want it to look painterly. So yeah, there's a few things that I need to do to touch up this, but basically the lesson is about looking, finding those simple shapes and painting them, and then layering the darks, putting in the lights, and then pulling it all together with those middle values. So I hope you found this lesson helpful. I'll do a little bit more on this and I'll post it at the end of the video. And keep this in mind, suggesting simple shapes.